Well, hey, it says I'm live. If I'm not CGI, no idea about the sound. These don't have anything to do with the sound, so I can't hear myself. But I'm just going to try anyway. See if I can go somewhere else and find me and look at me somewhere else and see how the sound sounds, if it sounds. I'm sure that makes perfect sense. But if I can go live this way, it's going to get better than better, eh? Challenge is the build on this PC. I broke it. It broke it. And the version is strange, and I'm not sure about how to patch it. And I'm just kind of disgusted with Google. Don't necessarily want their management services because I like my OSI like it is. What am I looking for here? This is great video, and I don't know if you can hear me. Anyway, so let's try this. I got my cell phone up, and the live stream's coming on. Let's try this. I got my cell phone up, and the live stream's coming on. Try this. I got my cell phone up, and the live stream's coming on. Try this. I got my cell phone up, and the live stream's coming on. Try this. I got my cell phone up, and the live stream's coming on. All right. So what you just heard was my cell phone delay compared to my live video delay. Turn the cell phone off. I can see the picture is really bad. I don't know what the resolution of this thing is. But what is interesting is I can go live from here without having to worry about much more than my haircut and shave. So yeah, makeup didn't show. But I kind of enjoy these. Maybe I could do these from this laptop. As you can see, it's all about the presentation. I'm so worried about my job applications and who would be interested in hiring me, because that's why you'd hire me, because I look good fucky. All right. So what did I mention back in my mentioning? Tired of pollution too? See it on the horizon, smell it in the air. So I get triggered, right? I use that word. I use it a lot because it means trigger. It means your finger's ready to pull and go off on something. And everyone does this stuff. You do it, for your faith. You do it for your family, your neighborhood, your school, your whatever. You defend your ideas in your space. That's all fair. That's all fair, good conversation. If you understand, if you're trying to understand both sides of the conversation, it's a good conversation. If you're just trying to preach, you got nothing for me anyway. So, found an article in the Guardian paper out of London, and I look more at foreign media for what they're saying about us than I do for American media, because Rachel Maddow isn't enough. Anyway, the reporting on all of these events are just how they are with it. I'm not paying for the reporters to go. Paying for me is a choice between what day I don't want to have a decent meal. And I eat oatmeal. I don't mind. Rice is good. So 1.6 million Americans living near incinerators in the U.S., but it's not in the news. one of my back videos, I spoke a little bit when I got off the plane to visit friends in Sweden. One of the first things I noticed was the shape of a stack on the horizon. And I noticed it because it's a very typical incinerator stack design. There's usually 2 or 4 tubes inside the stack. They're kind of a pretty specific height in the atmosphere because of the count on the convection currents above the air above, to try to get all those particles released to disperse and not accumulate. So if those stacks are working like they're supposed to, they're putting a atmospheric load, an atmospheric burden of pollutants into the space around the planet. The borders don't matter. Those lines we draw everywhere don't matter. So these are pollutant sources. I speak to nuclear. I could speak to others, but you get into more chemistry than I understand well. But I do know how to read MSDS sheets, which are interesting. They're the rest of the information that's not on the bottle. They're also, well, they are, so those manufacturers' safety data sheets. Now, notice I said manufacturers say these are created by the industry through self-regulating rules and auditing and checks, and they are based on good science. But the wording, the weight, even some of the science could be missed in some of those. So there's just a grain of salt in not being triggered by something that you see going by, I suppose. So there is a challenge in if this is even live or listenable. I'm only at 7 minutes, so we'll go 15. So yes, there are lots of things in the planet to think about. We have to have functioning institutions on our side, and corporations are not necessarily on our side. The government in the Constitution has to speak to corporations because they created corporations in the papers we agree is our Constitution. On paper, no immaculate conception. We know the authors, we know their intents and desires very well. We know their faults and foibles somewhat. Some of them like to wear dresses. Oh my gosh. He just never got caught, you know? Come on, folks. So 1.6 million people in America are near incinerators. Instead of talking in vague things, and I'm not going to hand you references, so don't go there. Do not bring me zeros, or you're disingenuous. You're a very poor troll, a practicing troll, or you're still feeling out where you can attack. You know, finding that one little weakness, that one little trigger that was setting me off in a different direction. So, bless you, my sons. Good luck. So, these incinerators I've always been aware of because I had exhaust stack emission monitors for 3 years. I had groundwater emission monitors that were looking for volatile organics in the rain troughs because we've had enough problem with leaks in the process that we had some spills of note. There's spills of record somewhere. One of them I found. because I was walking out to my instrument house wondering what was going on with it. It was being commissioned, which wasn't my responsibility. I was the on-site support engineer for a group of engineers out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from the steel industry. So the analyzer had to be added because we had discussed, I had brought up, along with a lot of other people, some concerns over this and emissions into the Houston Ship Channel if the volumes got large enough. The cost of treating this and separating it in waste ponds that were susceptible to flooding. Those are all considerations. Do you have a big enough waste pond? So my only concern was that instrument, and about a half-mile walk out to it, past tank farms to the end of the facility, into one of our, would be a holding tank in the case of a disaster. It probably held about 50 trucks worth of liquid waste, which would be maybe one or two of half a dozen tanks leaking, catastrophic leak would fill that emergency reservoir pit size. But I noticed in looking at Google Maps that a lot of that has been changed around for better or worse. And I'll say, could have an opinion. So these are measurements. That was one measurement. I had a dozen by the time we were done, gas chromatographs. Each one, some of them were redundant or they were doing the same thing on parallel processes. Some of them, most of them were unique in-process instruments. And I maintained probably 6 digits of accuracy on those instruments. From, 2 digits from their base requirements. So it all makes sense to me. And you certify and you test and you make sure and you trend and you watch these things because you're making quality decisions on with them. So I know about stack emissions. I know some little small part of it. I had also done a state bid package for exhaust stack emissions, full instrumentation monitoring and state interfaces with the state of New Jersey for exhaust stack emissions for the facility. And I ended up recommending a no bid to my peers for a lot of reasons. So I have a lot of knowledge about stacks and stack emissions in general chemistry, not specific chemistry, and I could go find the specific chemistry to support my general chemistry if you want to go in the rabbit hole. But the point is, the emissions from our incinerators needs to be discussed. Period. End. The plant in downtown Detroit in a, let us say, a poor neighborhood that made Cadillacs had one of these incinerators, and it was basically shut down more than it was turned on. They were burning medical waste. Those types of plastics can and do and will recombine in the stack into other elements because they're cooling as they go up. Energy levels and rules and laws, even simple binding chemistry, a valence bond, a handshake valence bond on the way up the stack can change an energy level, and all of a sudden a new element or molecule can be created, and you can create enough of them because of statistics that people, 1 out of 1,000 is going to get a cancer. This is the subtlety of these measurements. But 1 out of 1,000 in a population of 1,000,000 is 10,000 people are going to get cancer. If I did the math quick in my head, right? So these are numbers, and you have to be able to, if the reactor in the city of New York went, we would instantly need 10 hospitals, 3 triage centers, 100 ambulance. We'd need, so, okay, the reactor's going, how do I know? Well, there's an alarm. Is the alarm any good? Is it what? what was the evacuation procedure? It was only, what, how many millions of us to evacuate? No problems here. No problems here. I'm at 15 minutes. Maybe I should stop. But somehow there's a catharsis in speaking to this, to what I consider, honestly, that is taking weight off my soul. So, the, a bombastic conversation. Now, that's not a, 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 it's a qualifier, but it is not a label, right? Bombastic is just a way of presenting. Bombastic is a part of a three-ring circus. Bombastic is just another one of those interesting words that are out there. So yeah. But veterans, Vietnam era veterans, I haven't gone there a whole lot. So that's for you, dude. All I heard was stories of Vietnam. I wasn't a combat veteran. I went in, volunteered, but make no mistake, I had an electronics guarantee that basically said if they did not give me the schools that I had signed up for, that I could get out of the service. I don't know if I would have challenged or done that, but what that meant is if I had failed schools at any point through those classes, I would have lost the guarantee for electronics training. And there was, it was just so I somehow at 17 was smart enough to know that that was a good career choice, and maybe I could do it because I can pass tests. I have that privilege, that gift. I can talk to people. So yes, all of these things are matter. So as I progressed through the service, I was offered lots of other choices because I passed tests very well. One of the choices was I could go air wing. It would change my occupational skills line that I was guaranteed. So I was guaranteed an electronics, which is there's a few different MOSs if you into occupational skills. So I had kind of an ace in my pocket. There was no ace. It was just, a thought in my mind that I could get those schools and get some kind of education out of this. This was my choice over college. And doors. So I got an education most couldn't get. There is nothing like it on the planet I know of that matches it without getting into doctorate degrees and that level of studies and interactions. So, yeah, that's bragging. But we're doing this anyway. So, those dioxins that come out of that plant, 1.6 million Americans living near incinerators. I would argue it's a lot more than that. If you go look at plume maps, remember I discussed those. Those facilities, all facilities, have those attributes and could be looked at. It's one thing to do a single point, single day survey with an instrument. It's another one to have multiple surveys over time to look for change, and then you can go look for the driver for change. Because remember, we can see the future. We just don't want to admit, we don't want to think of the power we humans have. We don't want somebody else to be responsible for situations. Well, I am at 20 minutes, my friends. This is the best I got. and I just keep giving it anyway. Glasses of reading glasses, there's prescriptions, I need. But if I tried to make this into a paper knife, I'd be using the wrong drivers for using my voice. So chemtrails could be real. HAARP could be real. The tangles, the threads, the quantums involved in doing this make it all easier to make into something UFOs and sell your book or good guy or Clorox animals like that. There was not happy. So, sorry, rambling on. At 21 minutes here. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks YouTube for whatever's.